something which is important to know, because if you do not get this, if you do not incorporate this understanding and make changes in who you are, then you are increasing your risk day by day that you will be incompatible with the energetics of ascension. Welcome back for another channel. Please right now like and share and even comment on this video. I have arrived in my new country. We traveled for 3 days. It was exhausting. It was so crazy. We missed our connecting flight in the transit location. We had to hang around for like 24 hours, and it was nuts, especially because I'm traveling with my small dog. So we're walking around airports. We were in 4 airports walking around with my dog just following. I never leash him. He's totally free to follow me and do what he wants. So it was a bit of mayhem. You can probably imagine. But we're here and I'm frazzled. I haven't really slept much, but I will do my best to bring you a nice channel today. If you haven't read this book yet, please do. Highly recommend it. It's called The 3 Awakenings That Save Humanity. It's available in paperback, ebook and audiobook, and the link for this is found below this video. If you would like to have a private channeling session with me, that's something that's also possible. All you need to do is click the link below this video, and that's going to take you to a form where you can submit an inquiry, and then that will just start a conversation. Doesn't commit you to anything. It'll also give you access to some other channels that I've done privately for clients who were then gracious enough to allow me to post it for you to have a look and see what you think. My course is still coming along well. I've just kind of missed a whole week of work because of this whole moving saga, but I'm back at work today and hopefully I can get all that finished off before the end of this week. And now on to today's subject. So last week the question was, why is there a rise in darkness? And this week I'm going to continue that along that theme a bit. And so the question is, if humanity is moving into the light, why are some people becoming darker? Greetings and thank you for the question. If humanity is moving to the light, then why is it that some people are becoming darker? We have inspired this question today because this is something which is important for you who is watching now to understand. There are energetic dynamics at play which will have a very direct influence on you, who you are being, and also ultimately in which way that you will shift in your energies. Of course, because ascension is on the horizon for humanity, then we can safely assume, if you're watching this, then it is your desire that you will shift into the light and then be part of the ascension event. And to be part of the ascension event, this implies that you have compatible metaphysics with the ascension event. And compatible metaphysics means that you have a vibrational quality which places you above the threshold. The ascension is referred to in other texts and other channelings as a harvest. And the reason that it is spoken of in this way is because just as when the kernels or the fruits of the wheat plant are harvested, it is the head that was harvested and the stalk is left alone, left still standing. So, to apply that metaphor to humanity, it means that there is going to be a portion of humanity which will metaphorically be the head of the wheat plant and will be harvested. And so there is a demarcation or a threshold. Those below the threshold will not be included in the harvest, and those above the threshold will be included in the harvest. And the defining parameter will be your vibration. If your vibration is high enough, elevated enough, then this will mean you are compatible with the ascension event and therefore will be harvested. But if your vibration is denser or slower, placing you below this threshold, then you will not be included. So, going back to this original question, by having an understanding of why it is observable that some are polarizing to the light and yet some are polarizing to the dark, will give you insight into your own energetics and how you can better calibrate them so that you are part of the harvest. So, let us begin by speaking about the polarities of the spiritual spectrum. At one end you have the light, and at the other end you have the darkness. And throughout humanity's existence, humanity has existed somewhere along this spectrum. So partially of the darkness and partially of the light. And this composition is really the presentation of a species which does not fully realize what it is. And so it can entertain the misconception that it is something which it is not. Because as you have arisen from the One, and the One is the light and nothing but the light, then you also are comprised of this substance, the light and nothing but the light. So your true essence is the light and nothing but the light. However, in the unique presentation of the earth human being and all sentient beings birthed within your solar system, you were born without the immediate recognition of some fundamental understandings, and one of those is that you are the light and nothing but the light. And without this inherent understanding of what you are, there opens the possibility for spiritual dichotomy, meaning that you identify as the light and yet also as the darkness. I love those people, and yet I hate those people. This is a spiritually dichotomous state, because you are identifying with the darkness. I hate. I am angry. Yet the ultimate truth is you are not those things. It is just a misconception. However, now that humanity is approaching this end phase of its passage through the third density, this mingling of the energetic states where virtually all humans were partially of the light, partially of the darkness, through this phenomenon of misconception of self, is drawing to an end. And what is beginning to occur is there is an awakening of humanity. And this awakening is inclusive of many things, including the epiphany that I think I'm essentially a good person. I am fundamentally virtuous. I feel my greatest resonance is with this concept of the all-loving Creator. And these concepts which are more debased or debauched or degenerate, I'm feeling a growing incongruency with those. And I can no longer entertain emotional states which are a vibratory match to those. Less and less I feel drawn to those ideas, and more I have an inclination to reject those ideas. And this is this wholesale movement of humanity into the light, as it more and more realizes this just doesn't feel right to me. These ideas at my very core ring as untrue, ring as unjust, ring as without virtue, ring as false. And that is essentially a bifurcation of humanity. Humanity is, in the most part, purging this misconception of self, purging the darkness. I no longer hate those people because I understand the world in a different way. I'm no longer angry because I understand the world in a different way. I'm no longer sad because I understand the world in a different way. I'm realizing that these emotional states I entertained in the past were the result of forces which seem to have as their objective me feeling this way. And so I no longer place my belief and my trust in those vehicles of influence. And of course, we are speaking of things like your government, your entertainment media, your news media, your education system, your judicial system. These are all losing their capacity for influence and their authority. And as humanity now sort of moves away from those pillars of influence, then it is free to make a discovery about what it is, which has been deliberately fettered, suppressed, and prevented to the greatest degree that was possible through these cultural pillars of influence. And why has it been done this way? It's because those that have usurped control of these cultural pillars of influence are motivated by the dark. They have chosen the philosophical pathway of darkness. And part of their objective is that you do not realize you are the light, and you continue to identify with the darkness because this empowers them. Their might is through darkness. And the more that you identify with darkness, then the greater is their power. And extrapolating this on an entire global species basis, they are very powerful if humanity is very dark. Now, this bifurcation also implies that there is a movement towards the darkness rather than to the light if humanity is bifurcating. There are some which have been unable to break free and recognize the incongruency with the true essence of who they are with the narrative, the false narrative which is put forward through these cultural pillars of influence, which have been usurped by the cabal of darkness, the unified malevolence, which pits itself against humanity. And so in a way they have been duped to believe that that is the righteous path. That having the right to do things which those that are polarizing to the light look upon as evil, abhorrent, against nature, and so on, for those that are polarizing to the dark, is something they feel very passionate about. It is their individual right. And this individual right to do as they please is what true virtue is. So they go deeper into the darkness as the message coming through the false narrative becomes more bold, becomes more radicalizing. Because the awakening has placed the cabal of darkness onto a shorter timeline. And this is something that we discussed in much greater length in the previous channel. But essentially, the unified malevolence, to use another metaphor, are now sprinting to the finish line naked, meaning that the luxury of subtlety is not something they possess anymore. So they have to breach the threshold of obviousness, where they can no longer lurk in the shadows, manipulating their way to the ultimate culmination of their agenda. And this breaching of this threshold of unobservability, of below being obvious, has also allowed them to be more radical in their message, to be more poisonous in their rhetoric. And for those that are fully asleep, not yet awakening, this harder message has drawn them even deeper into the darkness. So there is this bifurcation. And as humanity increasingly bifurcates, and this middle ground in the spiritual spectrum becomes less occupied, it means that there is a greater intensity of the light within the human field, and yet at the same time there is a greater intensity of darkness within the human field. And these intensified polarities also, as a direct consequence of this phenomenon, have a greater gravitational pull. So the light is much more attractive than it has ever been in the past to humanity. And so this is why so many of you now are becoming very interested in the idea of God, of Jesus, of religion, of the spiritual scriptures, and so on. Yet even in the past you may not have considered yourself religious at all. And yet why is it that there was a time in my life where I was dismissive of religion? I laughed and mocked people who were religious. Yet now I find myself drawn to the idea. Going to church doesn't seem like such a bad idea. Learning more about God seems like a good idea. And in a very similar way, there are those that are going deeper into the darkness and find themselves increasingly drawn to these ideas of Satan worship, of hedonism, of doing whatever it is that you want to do, because it is your full right as a human being to be fully indulgent in whatever desires you possess. This is my right. If I am alive, and it is a possibility, then clearly that means it's my right to do it. And so we have this bifurcation to the intensifying polarities of light and darkness. Now, let us get to the part of this conversation which is relevant to you, and something which is important to know, because if you do not get this, if you do not incorporate this understanding and make changes in who you are, then you are increasing your risk day by day that you will be incompatible with the energetics of ascension and therefore be not included in the harvest. All of humanity, no matter who you are, is still spiritually dichotomous, meaning that there is still going to be a part of you which is not entirely of the light. Although when you are polarized very completely to the light, it is in an indiscernible amount and the impact it has is essentially zero. But just as a metaphysical aspect of the third density experience within this solar system, it is not possible to be of the light and entirely of the light in a fully realized state while you are still a third density being. And this is a very deliberate part of the design so that the experiment which has occurred here could play out the way that it has. And of course, the experiment is, if a species is birthed into creation without immediate recognition that it is of the light and nothing but the light, will it, over a process of experiencing the darkness, playing with the darkness, observing the darkness, come to the realization that it is not the darkness, and therefore find its way entirely into the light in a fully realized state that I am the light and nothing but the light, through epiphanic realization. And then, as a direct consequence of having arrived at this realization through the process of passing through the gauntlet of darkness, make the philosophical choice to follow the path of light. This is ultimately what is being tested here in your solar system. Because if this is, yes, that when a special group that has been birthed into creation without possession of this fundamental understanding passes through the gauntlet of darkness, ascends into an epiphanic realization that they are the light, nothing but light, and then chooses, this is the important part, the philosophical pathway of light, almost exclusively, then this means those that choose the philosophical pathway of darkness would eventually, over a long period of time, if this prototypical process is adapted throughout the cosmos, then darkness would disappear from the all, and much of the suffering would disappear from the all. Not because there has been a mistake or there is something wrong, but because the one is always accumulating more experience of itself. And this means it has more experiential knowledge of itself. And some of this experiential knowledge that it's accumulating is literally through your life, because you are the one ultimately. And so the one is experiencing itself through the proxy, which is you. So your very day-to-day activities and life living is part of the accruement of experiential understanding that the one is growing through the all. And it has now reached a point where the new capacity which is available in the way that it manifests itself in the third density experience, in the fourth density experience, in the fifth density experience, and so on, throughout the cosmos, has evolved to a point where the darkness is not necessary anymore. And so this is why the galactic being in which you find yourself and the solar system being in which you find yourself and the earth being on which you find yourself have decided to play out this experiment here, testing this new potential, this new capacity, so that the all going forward can be paradigmically different to how it is now. So this is a big implication. If you desire to be part of the ascension and Now that you have the awareness that there is this bifurcation, and importantly in this bifurcation concept is that each of the polarities have a greater gravitational pull than they ever had before. So you will be drawn to the light more than you ever have before. Some will be drawn to the darkness more than they ever have before. But here is the caveat. If you do not purge your darkness sufficiently and stop identifying with emotional qualities which are not you, and also stop engaging in activities which are low in their vibration, which are not virtuous, then you place yourself at risk that the gravitational pull of the darkness, which still has an attachment to you through this propensity to entertain dark emotions or to enjoy a dark desire, will draw you into the darkness. And you will find, if you do not address this, that you risk becoming very bifurcated in yourself, where it almost begins to seem like you are living two lives. There is a life that everybody sees where you appear to be a loving, virtuous person, and yet there is one particular thing that you have not let go of, which is low in its vibration. You know it's not right. You know you shouldn't do it, but you enjoy to do it, so you continue doing it. Yet it is a secret. It's something no one must know. If anyone ever found out that I was doing this is something that I still enjoyed, it would be devastating for my life. It would be devastating for my reputation. If you have something in your life now that makes you feel this way, then take pause and consider it in the context of what has just been explained about this bifurcation and increasing intensification of the energetic polarities in the spiritual spectrum, and appreciate that you are being drawn into the darkness. If you are finding it difficult to release this activity, to stop indulging in this dark pleasure, then it is not solely because you are weak. It's not solely because you are a bad person. A big part of this is the literal energetics which are drawing you into it, and in a way is addicting you to it. So, rather than condemn yourself and hate yourself and berate yourself that you continue to do this, understand to a degree you are just being caught in the ebb and flow of the energetics. And if you don't let it go, there is a very great risk that it will draw you so far into the darkness that you bifurcate to a degree that part of your energetic field will resonate darkly, low, dense, and be an ugly, embarrassing, guilty secret which you wish you did not have, but you seem unable to let go. Yet while at the same time you will feel you are becoming more virtuous, polarizing to the light, becoming a better person, becoming more demonstrative of the light in all other ways, except this one thing you cannot let go. But it is important that you let it go now, because the longer you hang on to it, the more this part of your energetic field will polarize to the darkness, and the more difficult it will become to let it go. You must let it go now, because each day that passes it becomes less likely you will be able to do it. And if you find, when the ascension event comes and that's still part of your life, then it's very likely it will have a quality of darkness which is so intense and so potent that from an overall energetic average, it will diminish your vibration enough that you will be below the threshold and therefore not included in the harvest of ascension. So, be very honest with yourself. Now is not the time to fool yourself, to tell yourself sweet lies. Because there is more at stake than just the indulgence of a pleasurable vice. If you struggle to let it go, then expand your self-identity, remembering you are multiple beings at the same time, because the all is fractal, meaning there are patterns embedded within patterns, embedded within patterns, embedded within patterns. And you, the individual that you see in the mirror, is an iteration of this pattern. And so you are embedded into a larger iteration of this pattern, which is embedded into a larger iteration of this pattern. What we are saying is, you are the being you see in the mirror, and yet you are also a larger being, an aspect of a group being. And that group being itself is an aspect of a larger group being, and that group being is itself an aspect of a larger group being. So if you wish to contemplate the decisions you are making in this form you see now in the mirror, this avatar which is temporarily representing the higher self aspect of who you are, then shift your perspective into these expanded identities and start considering these decisions from those larger perspectives. So, the next iteration of your identity is the special being, the humanity being, the single being of which you are a part. What is the objective of this being? This being wishes to awaken as many of the individual aspects of itself as it possibly can, so that when there is the ascension into the fourth density state, it ascends in the most complete way that it possibly can. So as many of its individual aspects are included in the harvest as possible. And so its objective is that each of these individual aspects of itself are polarized to the light in a very complete and unified rather than bifurcated way, so that it is part of this unified ascension as the single being. So from that perspective, looking at your own life, then clearly the decision this humanity being perspective of self makes is to let it go. And then consider the next iteration of your self-identity, because the humanity being, the group being of which you are a part, is an aspect of the earth being. The earth being also wishes to ascend. And this is something which we explained in detail in the book, which we co-wrote with the channel. To give you a quick summary of why the Earth will ascend. Typically, planets do not ascend. They stay as a static being throughout their existence. However, part of this unique paradigm which has been tested within your solar system means that beings which are the apex sentients of each planet, including humanity, are going to pass through a very broad vibrational range. Because as humanity began with this lacking the fundamental understanding that is the light, nothing but light, meant that there has been a great propensity to misidentify with the darkness, to be beings which are very dense and low in their vibration. And yet through this process of passing through the gauntlet of darkness and arriving at this epiphanic realization that humanity is the light and nothing but the light, is a very broad range of vibrational experience. And typically, a planet would not be able to accommodate a single species which is going to pass through such a broad range of vibrational existence. So, this means that the Earth that was compatible with humanity when humanity was at its darkness would not be compatible with humanity once it has ascended into the fourth density state and exists as the unified humanity being, the single being, fully realized of itself as the light and nothing but the light. This earlier version of the Earth could not accommodate that species. Because never before in history, beyond the existence of the solar system, has that been a requirement. That a planet is able to accommodate a species which transforms to such a degree. So, this means it necessitates that your planet also passes through its own ascension. So that when humanity passes into the fourth density state, your planet also will shift into a high dimensional state. And thereby, compatibility between planet and species will be maintained. And the Earth human will be able to continue its existence as the higher dimensional being on a higher dimensional Earth. So, from that perspective, identifying as the Earth being, what is it the Earth being desires? The Earth being desires to shift into the higher dimensional state in the most complete way that it can. Because you are the Earth. The Earth is experiencing itself through the proxy which is you. Just as we said, the One is experiencing itself through the proxy which is you. Because it is a fractal existence. The All is fractal. And so the humanity being is experiencing itself through the unique perspective which is you. The Earth being is experiencing itself through the unique perspective which is you. The solar system being is experiencing itself through the unique perspective which is you. And so on until the One is experiencing itself through the unique perspective which is you. So you are the Earth. The Earth wants to ascend in a complete way, and that would mean that all aspects of itself which have been chosen in a way to be part of this new ascended state. And when we say chosen, we don't mean it to say that chosen on the basis of you have been judged worthy. Because it is not that at all. It's completely just the dry mathematical metaphysics of the energetic dynamics of the ascension event. It is solely on that basis. It is not a subjective judgment. But when we say chosen, we say that from this context of the Earth being ascending to imply that there are some species that are alive on your planet now that are not intended to be part of the Earth organism in the higher density state. Because there is no functionality to them be included in that. So they will be just recycled back into the all and then repurposed in some other way. That is how we mean chosen in this conversation. So, humanity, however, is chosen in this definition to be part of the earth being in this ascended state. And so the earth also, just as the humanity being does, wishes to pass into the ascended state in the most complete way it possibly can. Meaning that it wants as many of the individual aspects of itself which are intended for ascension to be included in the ascension as possible. So, shifting your perspective into that of the earth being, because this is you. You are the earth being. Then clearly, the decision which is most in alignment with his expanded self-definition is that you let it go. Whatever it is that you know is preventing you from being entirely virtuous in every facet of who you are must be let go. Is wisest to let go. And you can play this game of expanded identity and consider how each of these identities would consider and problem solve this situation. And ultimately you will always come to the same conclusion. It is time to let it go. So, let us finish in this way. We are not accusing you of anything. This is not an assumption of guilt. But it is safe to say that you are not purely virtuous. Because you are a dichotomous being. It is an inherent fundamental state of being a third density human at this time. So, we are speaking just about the practical implications of the design of this matrix in which you find yourself. And also, it is all occurring within the context of a unified malevolence which is utilizing the cultural pillars of influence to literally draw you into the darkness, to literally make you reject the light. So, we are not condemning you. We are not saying that you are weak. We are not saying that you are bad. We're not saying any of these things. This is literally just a very objective conversation so that you can navigate the energetics that are at play and find your way all the distance to the destination at which you are heading. The fact that you have made it this far and that you are listening to this conversation in a way which is not dismissive but is taken with great consideration means that we are already very pleased and impressed with you, because you are well along the path. So, now is the time to think very seriously about who you are, about how you spend the moments of your life, about any dark secrets you are clinging to. If you want to have greater satisfaction in your life, then we can say with great confidence, it will be if you become entirely virtuous. If you become a being which is, to the greatest degree of which you are possible, of the light and nothing but the life. You, perhaps, clinging to something which you know is of a low vibration, you continue to do it because it satisfies you. You get something from it which is pleasurable, which is enjoyable, which is nice enough that the idea of letting it go seems your life would be duller, would be less fulfilling, would be a little more boring. However, this is untrue, because by having that in your life, you are inhibiting your capacity to reach levels of satisfaction which are only possible in greater states of virtue. Your sense of beingness, through the perspective of how much you enjoy it, is absolutely correlated to the rate of your vibration. The higher your vibration, the more life satisfies you. The more you spend each moment imbued with the emotional qualities of love and its derivatives. So, all you need to do to have a more satisfying life is go deeper into the light, be more virtuous, vibrate with a higher frequency. And the objective that you think you are achieving by continuing to act without virtue will be surpassed. You will derive a sense of satisfaction not only equivalent to what you are getting through this dark pleasure, or through whichever it is that you can't let go, but receiving way in excess also. All of the things which you think in the fundamental righteous way of being a being full of joy, excitement, love, satisfaction, fulfillment, contentedness, and so on. These are all found in greater abundance within the light field. There is nothing that you need from the darkness end of the spiritual spectrum. It is just misconception of who you are. It is a waste of your self-identity. And at this very moment in the human evolutionary path, it is a great waste of time and opportunity. You have lived 1,000 lifetimes more so that you could be ready for the ascension event when it occurs and be part of the harvest. Consider all that you have done, all of the suffering you have endured, all of the pain and confusion that you have dealt with in preparation for this current incarnation you are living now. And realize that doing anything to jeopardize all of that effort is insane. It is craziness. And it is foolish living. We know you are not a fool. So we beseech you to live wisely, to expand your identity, and as such, perceive what it is that you do through the lens of greater wisdom. And increase the rate of your shift into the virtue zone, becoming increasingly pure in your beingness, and as a direct result, increasingly abundant in the satisfaction you experience on a moment-to-moment basis. Thank you, and we love you.